After the official release of chapter 236, I think it's pretty clear to see that this is in fact one of the best chapters of the series. Like, I'm not gonna lie to you guys, if you've seen my leaks video, you know that I did have a problem or two with the chapter, but I did clarify in that same video that this is definitely one of those chapters that you would want to read with official scans or translations. So with the official release of the chapter, I think it's about time that, I go over the chapter and break it down and explain exactly what was going on, because let's be real, this is one of the biggest chapters of the series and there is a lot to get into. Now, I do want to preface that although I usually don't have the biggest faith in the Viz scans, for this chapter specifically, I do feel that Viz has the best translations. So for those of you like myself who probably prefer the TCB scans or, read something else, the Viz translations, in my opinion, does seem to flow the best and be the most concise. So keep that in mind. There also isn't going to be like a specific structure or script, for this video. I'll just be tackling, different talking points as they come up in the chapter. So yeah, with everything out the way now, the first thing I wanted to go over is something that a lot of people, including myself, had a problem with, and that is Gojo getting killed off screen. Now, obviously, I'm not the only one that had a problem with this, but here's the thing. I do believe that there is a reason that Gege, wrote it like this. I mean, even in the author comments, Akutami makes a joke about, seeming to forget a chapter. So it obviously isn't something that Gege isn't aware of. It's just that this is the specific way he wanted to end Gojo's character. I think a lot of people are really caught up on what they subjectively want, but at the end of the day, all Gege really has to do is make sure all of this stuff fits cohesively, which, in the end, it really does. We get an explanation as to what happens. We get the final thoughts of Gojo and, the exposition of many different characters that's already died, in the grand scheme of things. But at the same time, really feels like it was needed, because the whole point is that Gojo died as Satoru Gojo. He didn't die as the strongest. He didn't die with regrets like Principal Yaga said sorcerers do. Hell, he didn't even die alone. Like, when you objectively look at things, this is possibly the best death that any sorcerer could have gotten. And I'm not just talking about visually because, it happened off screen, because I'm gonna be real with you guys, I still would have liked to see it, but the point is, Gojo's death is by far the most well done in the series. And I'm talking visually, thematically, emotionally, everything. I mean, we can even argue that we might get to see, some form of Gojo dying in the next chapter, through the student's perspective or something. So technically, it's not even 100% ruled out, but nonetheless, it is something that, I initially did, really dislike, but I did come to appreciate how Gege even had the balls to do it in the first place. I think a lot of us that's actually been reading the story can agree that we knew that Gojo had to die at some point, whether it was during this fight or immediately thereafter. A lot of us did figure that, Gojo was going to die. It just makes the most sense, narratively. It just, obviously threw people off, how it happened. And, that's completely fair. A lot of people aren't going to completely grasp exactly what's going on, especially when it seems like something, is kind of missing from the chapter. Hence why, official translations were so important in the first place. But yeah, now that I've covered Gojo's death, I do want to cover something that, a lot of people were confused about, and that is Gojo's conversation with Geto. There is a lot of people that think that, the way that Gojo was talking about Sukuna, or just the way he carried the conversation in general, was not only out of character for Gojo, but a lot of people seem to think that it's just downright something Gojo wouldn't say at all. And here's what I'll say about it. Looking at things from face value, it does kind of look like Gojo is being out of character here, but that's only if, you just look at this chapter for, one chapter and, you don't add the full context. For example, when Gojo talks to Geto about not knowing if he's strong enough to beat Sukuna without the 10 shadows, it may seem like Gojo's being like a little too humble here, but you got to keep in mind that Gojo has pretty much lived his whole life as the strongest. He even talks about how at some point he drew a line between himself as a human and as a living creature. And as someone who can empathize with Sukuna the most, Gojo might be the only one that knows the loneliness that comes with being the strongest. I mean, beside a certain smoke god. But jokes aside, I think the point is Gojo is no longer burdened by the title of the strongest, so there's no need for him to be pompous or, prideful about anything. I mean, it's even validated by how Geto responds to Gojo. Like, even Geto's surprised by how Gojo says something so quote-unquote out of character. And it's even further built upon when Haibara says something about Gojo sounding like a military general. Like, the whole point is that Gojo is being out of character, which again is there to show that Gojo is no longer burdened by being the strongest. And speaking of not being the strongest, that actually brings me to my next point, and that's, obviously Gojo admitting that he's not the strongest and that Sukuna held back. And there's two things I want you guys to keep in mind here, because again, you know, when I first read this, I also thought that it was kind of like weird that he was saying this, because from the perspective of someone who, you know, just saw the entire fight, you know, seeing just how even the fight was, even given the fact that Sukuna had the 10 shadows, when you first read this, it might seem kind of weird and disingenuous because it kind of seemed like the fight could have went either way, which, you know, that could very well be the case. But for one, Gojo never forced Sukuna to play every card he had, and Gojo said it himself, he used everything he had in his arsenal, every technique he had, you know, his quick thinking, he even had support from other characters, but at the end of the day, he just couldn't pull out the dub. Meanwhile, not only did Sukuna adapt to Limitless, therefore, you know, eventually defeating him, but he did so knowing that support was going to be there to fight him whether he won or not. And little side note, let's not tank, you know, Sukuna's character here. Gojo is definitely dead. There's no way that Sukuna will leave him alive. You know, no reawakenings, no RCT, no nothing. Gojo is dead. He's for sure dead. And think about it like this. Now that Sukuna has adapted to Infinity, it doesn't really matter if Gojo uses RCT or not. So in the end, even if Gojo did get up from RCT or something like that, Sukuna would just immediately cut him down again. So yeah, even though, you know, I love me a bit of copium every now and then, this is just too much copium. Gojo is dead. I've also seen a lot of people saying that the slash that Sukuna did against Gojo was something that, you know, it was a one-time thing or something, and I don't think that's true. For one, the way that Sukuna explained it, he pretty much just changed the application, you know, the target of, you know, the slashes. It wasn't like a binding vow or anything like that. It was simply just Sukuna changing the target. And another thing is, I don't really think it would matter if it was or wasn't, because we've seen that besides Gojo, nobody really can withstand the slashes anyway. So yeah, I know people don't want Sukuna to just seem more busted or more broken than he really is, but let's just be honest, this guy he's a monster. Like, he may be the only sorcerer that can actually copy different applications of sorcery. And I don't mean in a way that Yuta copies or, you know, Kenjaku copies. I mean like he actually copies the application. For example, there's been several occasions and statements throughout the series that, you know, pretty much foreshadows that Sukuna can in fact just copy things he sees once. He did it with Jogo's flame technique. He learned how to turn his soul into a cursed object just from seeing it once. He learned how to recover the burnt out curse technique just from seeing Gojo do it once. And of course, he used Mahoraga as a model, which eventually let him bypass the Infinity after, you know, just seeing it once. So at the end of the day, Sukuna using this, you know, space slashing technique or whatever isn't like an ass pull or anything. Rather, it actually falls very well within his character. So yeah, it does kind of make sense that Gojo was sad that, you know, Sukuna couldn't really go all out, and, you know, he really hoped that his feelings reached him, which by what Sukuna says at the end of the chapter, they clearly do. The second thing I want you guys to keep in mind is that it may have seemed like Sukuna may have needed the 10 shadows to win, which, let me just say, for those who, you know, who think that he does, I can't really say that I blame you for feeling that way, because even after, you know, understanding this chapter a lot more, that is one thing that I really think that this fight could have improved on, that being, you know, it being more clear whether or not Sukuna actually needed the 10 shadows or not, because like I said, there were some times in the fight where it really seemed like it could go either way, like the time Mahoraga protected Sukuna against Unlimited Void. But again, you know, since it was foreshadowed and, you know, we did get that little explanation from Gojo, in the end, everything still came out, you know, clear and concise. And, you know, that's how it should be. You know, there was no plot hole. There was nothing that indicated that Sukuna couldn't do what he did. And in the end, you know, that solidifies Sukuna as the better sorcerer. So yeah, I don't think any of this stuff tanks Gojo's character, you know, him being in the afterlife talking to, you know, the old homies, the way he's more humble. All of it just, you know, really makes sense in the end. And, you know, I'll just say it, you know, I was wrong. I thought this chapter was good, but I also thought that, you know, this chapter dropped the ball on a couple of things that, you know, would make this chapter a 10 out of 10. But yeah, after more reading and speculation, I do just have to say, yeah, this is an amazing chapter. And even if this isn't a 10 out of 10 for me, I can definitely see how it's a 10 out of 10 for others. The same way I can understand how it isn't a 10 out of 10 for others. But I will say that this is probably one of the best ways that Gege could have ended this fight. I mean, no, I don't exactly feel like Gojo's off-screen death was, you know, the best way to go about it. And I also wish that, you know, it was more clear that, you know, Sukuna actually needed the 10 shadows or not. Regardless, all of that is, you know, subjective, and it's not really indicative as to, you know, how the story should have went or how Gege actually wanted the story to go. So yeah, I was never really a person that hated this chapter or anything like that, but I've seen it online a lot that, you know, people actually hate this chapter. Like, people actually really dislike this chapter. So yeah, hopefully this video does explain, you know, some of the things that people may have had gripes about. But like I said, on reread, which I really recommend everyone does, things do actually make a lot of sense. And if there's anything to take from this video, it's really just trust the vision. Sometimes as fans, you know, we become really passionate about things, and to be honest with you, that's okay until we become a little too passionate. But I can't really be surprised because this chapter was huge in terms of narrative importance and, you know, someone dying like Gojo. Anyways, really looking forward to the next chapter. I really want to see what Gege is going to pull out his hat this time. And yeah, if you like the video, like and subscribe, you know, all the good stuff. There's like 97% of you guys that aren't subscribed. So yeah, let's even the ratio a bit. And yeah, if you like the breakdowns or, you know, reviews, Jujutsu Kaisen in general, subbing is definitely something you should consider. But I'm going to get out of here. You guys have a fantastic day, you know, or night, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.